Welcome everyone to Microsoft 365 UK user group. A warm welcome to you and guests from around the world, I guess, because it's a virtual event. And so this is our 10th edition. We started back in June. I'm Chirag Patel. I'm the organizer here for the M365 UK and run the user group. So once again, welcome to all of you. In terms of, we have two great sessions today with us, and we have everything about governance, in particular around the Office 365 space, but also touches other areas of Microsoft 365. And then we have another great session from Lesley Crook, Lee Ford, and Stephen Wade from Department for Works and Pensions. And so they're back again. Which is a warm welcome to them as well in terms of presenting their journey on Microsoft Teams adoption as they're rolling out there. And so we look forward to those two great sessions. And so with that, kind of just quickly introduce myself for the new guests who have joined Microsoft 365 UK user group. I'm Chirag Patel. Been around with SharePoint, Office 365, pretty much nearly 20 odd years. I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant working with Patel Consulting, work with many clients in various sectors, pretty much hands-on, working with SharePoint, Teams, Office 365, Endpoint. And then I'm also a trainer, part-time trainer, albeit, but I've just recently got the MCT, and that just basically means that I can kind of just get access to all the resources to help out learning and pass the knowledge and experiences for certain certified courses. There's my details, techchirag.com, and also all the information around M365 UK events and everything else is on my blog site. So if you do get time, please do take a look. And you can connect with me as well on Twitter. Usually use techchirag as a handle, both Twitter and LinkedIn. So if there's any way I can help you out, then please feel free to reach out to me. We have a event plan again for next month on the 14th of April. So we have again two great speakers there. We got Tommy Golds and also Nut from Norway as well. So we got sessions not just purely Microsoft Teams, but some development aspects of it with App Studio and bringing all the experiences around that. But also we have a new session around Microsoft Viva, which is a new product category from Microsoft. So look forward to that as well. So if you haven't already, then please do visit meetup.com/M365UK to register for next month's event. And in the meantime, for those of you, if you're interested in speaking or sharing your experiences, just like our speakers have over the last few months, then please feel free to submit a small, simple form, which is the URLs there. I'll post that in the Q&A. But yeah, feel free to reach out any topic. It doesn't have to be a full 50 minutes. It can be half an hour if you prefer, so I can help you with that. Or even try and mentor you as well to kind of get you speaking as well. So anything that I can help with, please feel free. And so like with every event, we kind of make the slides available hopefully by Friday, but also on YouTube as well. So M365 UK is the YouTube channel. You can just search on YouTube and you can subscribe to it. And there are previous sessions that I've uploaded onto the channel there as well. So with that, kind of just introduce Seb Matthews. Seb and I kind of know each other for many years, and great guy. In fact, in my view, is probably the most funniest, witty in terms of kind of visiting at community events, and also a organizer, one of the organizers at SharePoint Saturday London for 4 or 5 years now, and I had a pleasure to speak at that great community event. So. Just want to welcome Seb Matthews, and again, I'll let him introduce, but look forward to the Office 365 governance in practice and some real practical tips to get us going. So with that, Seb, over to you.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, great to have you here.
Great to be here. I'm just going to share a PowerPoint reading view, so hopefully that will work. Let me just take control of the share, so hopefully you can see a slide.
Yes, you're all good.
Perfect. Fantastic. So thanks, Chirag, for having me. It's great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller, I think is the expression that we're supposed to use these days for this kind of thing. In the context of what I'm going to run through today, first of all, you know, the slide deck I'm using is branded Provision Point, but I'm not here to represent Provision Point or sell you anything Provision Pointy. I'm one of the owners there, but that's the extent of what I'm going to say about it. I might mention it by accident from time to time, but it's not my intention for today to promote the organization in any way. As Chirag says, my name's Seb. Been around for a while. I like to describe myself as older than I look, and you know, I've been in and around the community probably for approaching 20 years now, in various communities: SharePoint world, SQL world, the PowerShell world, the Azure world, blooming Disney World for what it's worth. So you know, I've been around for a while, and I kind of, you know, we're supposed to have introductory slides these days as to who we are and what we're about. You know, I kind of see myself in 4 chunks. You know, I'm a father first and foremost, so I've got 2 kids of my own, 2 stepkids, 2 dogs. So a parent to 6 is how I see myself, and my partner is a parent to 7 because that includes me as well. My day job, I'm a consultant, as aren't we all these days, and I specialize in the defense, aerospace, aviation and space industries. I've been involved in some of the world's largest Microsoft projects over the years. I'm currently hold a senior role in another government organization, so you've got representation from DWP today and another one. I currently work for the organization that has all the guns and tanks and planes and ships. I'll let you figure out who that is. So, you know, several 100,000 users, and on a journey to the cloud, which is extremely exciting and somewhat distracting at the moment because of hafnium. So thank you, Chinese hackers. That's keeping me awake at night at the moment. 14% of me is a thinker. I write, I present, I speak, but also I get consulted by lots of organizations in and around the defense world to provide thinking. You know, I was a soldier for a long time, so I have perspectives from the inside of the armed forces as well as from the outside in industry, and so I get paid to think, which is a pretty decent situation to be in by any measure. And then for fun, I cook. You don't get this slender figure by not enjoying your food, and so I enjoy the odd bit of chefing now and then. I call it chefing; it's cooking, right? But you know, what matters is I like it, and you can find me on Instagram if you're interested in taking a view on the sorts of things that I cook, and that will make you salivate just by looking at them, especially if you're a meat eater. Anyway, that's the kind of background. That's who I am. That's why I'm here. Let's kind of run through a few basics. As Chirag said in his intro, I'm reasonably informal on how I do sessions like this, even with dry and formal subjects like governance. I tend to do things in a slightly informal way. There's plenty of time and space for formality, but for a session like this, you know, in 45 minutes, I'm not going to give you all the answers. In fact, I'm probably not going to give you any answers, to be honest. So I just want to set some expectations. It's absolutely not a magic bullet session. I'm not going to give you some framework or some set of documents or some clever thing or a link or a URL that says go here and you will magically have governance for your 365 estate. That's not how it works. What it is it's a helper towards thinking in a more simple way. My view is that if you have an absolute extant need for complex, sophisticated governance, you're going to learn bugger all from a session like this, right? You already know what you're doing in that sort of world. You know, you might be public sector in some way, shape or form, banking, pharmaceutical, something like that, you'll already have a pretty strong steer on what governance means and what it means to you. This session is just about organizations and people that have an interest in governance, don't really know perhaps where to start, and just to get you thinking about things rather than necessarily providing you all of the answers. And it's about framing as well. I use the term framing a lot. It's a very military expression to kind of say, look, I just want you to think about things perhaps in a slightly different way. There's a lot of really sophisticated, really complex, a lot of it rhetoric-based content around governance out there in the interwebs, some of it coming from sources like Microsoft and IBM and Oracle and folk like that, some of it coming from experts, some of it coming from experts, and you know, all I want you to do is just think simply, think about a few things, and then go away, take that away, do some exploration, do some research. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my details at the end of the session, and just kind of take it from there. Just step a foot onto the pathway and see where the journey takes you. So let's do some framing, right? So what is Microsoft 365 for users? I always find that if we're going to talk about governance and things like that, it makes sense to do a bit of framing around the communities that have an interest in governance. In my mind, to keep things simple, there are two broad communities for 365. You've got the user community and you've got the organizational community, and whatever that might mean to you. From a user perspective, you'll have heard this over the years. It's all about the 3 C's, right? Communication, coordination, collaboration. You'll have heard this a zillion times from a zillion different presenters, right? Communication, it's about letting the organization talk, both internally, externally, partners, suppliers, customers. It's about letting you ensure that the message is being shared, and it's there to provide you with technologies, tools, and a platform that allows communication in whatever form that might be, synchronously, such as voice video, asynchronously, such as SharePoint documents or something like that. It's about coordination. It's about keeping folks on the same page, right? So it's about ensuring that organizational information is available, it's up to date, it's relevant, it's fresh, it's contextualized. It's just about making sure that everybody within the organization and within your organizational scope, whatever that might be, public sector, it might be citizens. If you're private sector, it could be customers, partners, suppliers, whatever. It's just about making sure that people are on the same page, right? And then it's about collaboration. It's about working together. Here in the UK, you know, this concept of working smarter was really pushed by one of our telecommunications companies a few years ago. And, you know, that is kind of the bottom line with collaboration, right? Is organizations have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of corporate memory, they have a lot of very smart people. Even very small organizations have very smart people. Getting them working together, pulling in the right direction, pulling in the same direction, and being able to share information both privately and publicly. So that's kind of the framing for 365 from a perspective of users. From a perspective of the organization, there are 3 more C's. So does that mean there are 6 C's? I'm not sure, but you know, from a perspective of the organization, 365 gives us context and capability around cohesion. So it's around making sure that togetherness, and again, it's about togetherness in the sphere of the organization, whether that's internal or whether that's internal with external parties, it doesn't really matter. But again, it's about making sure that things are joined up. It's about making sure that the people, the information, intent, desire, mission, values, all that stuff lines up and comes together. It's about continuity as well. So it's about making sure that if bad things happen, the organization can continue to operate. It's about if technical challenges emerge. COVID's a decent example. The Microsoft 365 platform allows organizations to send their entire workforce home, operate from home, and bring your own device scenarios safely, securely, without compromising data, yada yada. And ensuring that an organization can continue to operate, can continue to exist, almost regardless of what happens in the context of the people, notwithstanding the fact, of course, that the people are the organization. But if something tragic happens to individuals at the top of the tree, or if, you know, people work in countries that are undergoing, you know, circumstances of duress, revolt, revolution, coup, whatever, you know, the platform provides a ton of technology to allow the organization to continue. And then the third piece is about compliance. So the third of the 3 C's for orgs is about compliance. It's about providing tools, capabilities, and services that enable the organization to keep themselves on the right side of both their own internal organizational constructs and policies, as well as any other external regulatory, legal, statutory, whatever, that matters in the context of whatever it is that, you know, an organization does. So, you know, an airline will want compliance in the context of full supply chain, and, you know, down to, you know, where did the bolt that holds a seat into an airframe come from, that sort of stuff. You know, an organization that makes plates might just want to be able to certify whether their clay is organic or something like that. And so the technology is there to provide us with prevention of loss, protection of data, protection of assets, protection of intellectual property, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty simple stuff, right? 3 C's for users, 3 C's for the organization. And, you know, in my head, you know, that's what, in the context of governance and in the context of why this session exists and why this conversation exists, that's what Microsoft 365 is all about. At this point, you know, it probably makes sense. I'm one of these Muppet folks who uses the term Office 365, Microsoft 365, 365, O365, M365. You know, I use all of these terms completely interchangeably. Clearly, there are a whole bunch of differences between all of these services, all of these capabilities, all these platforms, all these license types. I'm talking pretty generically here today, so, you know, don't get hung up if I'm using the term Microsoft 365, but you're only licensed for Office 365. Nothing I'm going to talk about today really makes a one iota of a difference as to whether you're unlicensed in one way, licensed in another way. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so moving forward, so why? So, you know, organizationally, you know, what are the objectives of governance? And, you know, I sit in rooms with folk in, you know, in sessions like this. I can't wait till we start to do sessions like this face to face again. I sit in consulting scenarios with customers. I sit in all sorts of scenarios with partners and other consultants, and in bars, drinking, shooting the breeze with folk who have an interest in Microsoft and Office 365. You know, and it usually comes down to, when we're talking at, you know, macro levels about governance, it usually comes down to these sorts of constructs, right? And it's, you know, another word that begins with C, right? It tends to always orbit around control, feature control, user control, data control. You know, it doesn't really matter. Commander control, it doesn't really matter. You know, the word control gets used a lot in the context of governance, and you know, without putting too fine a point on it, it's just wrong, right? That's not what it's about. If an organization believes that control is the end of is the objective, if they believe that control is the end game, there are circumstances where that is valid, right? There will always be regulations, statutory requirements, you know, heavily regulated industry, etc., where control might actually be a facet. But if that is the case, then you certainly don't want to advertise it as being controlled, right? Humans don't like being controlled, trust me. I'm sure, you know, every single one of you that are listening today, watching in the future, the idea of being controlled in any way, shape or form, apart from your COVID vaccination, of course, you know, is, you know, both abhorrent and, you know, counter to what it is we believe we are due as, you know, as humans and free thinkers, right? So think of governance in different ways, and I'm not going to give you exhaustive lists of what the actual objectives of governance are, but think about positive context, think about positive spin, right? Those of you from the UK that are listening or watching in the future, you know, you'll be well versed in the concept of spin. Our government are world leaders in generation of spin and generation of a positive view of something that might be seen as negative or hold a negative connotation. So think about objectives of governance being things like the protection of intellectual property, right? For most organizations, for many organizations, whether they're profit, not for profit, public sector, third sector, whatever, fourth sector, you know, the intellectual property forms an important part of organizational effectiveness, of organizational value, and so think about what that means, and when you're trying to govern, you know, perhaps you're trying to protect, see, rather than advertising how you would control how users do things. Sometimes it's just about putting different words into the same sentences, right? It's about guiding users. The term I'm using a lot at the moment is about provision of guide rails for users. Think about the metaphor of being at a bowling alley, and when you're, in my case, when my 6-year-old daughter, who's about 1 foot nothing, she's tiny, wants to have a go at knocking those 10 pins down, there's no way she's going to get a ball down without it being a gutter ball. So the little guide rails pop in, and boom, off she goes. She chucks the ball in, and it might bounce its way all the way down the lane, but she stands just as good a chance as I do at 6'2" and 250 pounds of getting a strike, simply because she's been guided. The ball has been guided to its target. It's about the enabling of compliance, right? A lot of organizations, unless their business is compliance or their business is predicated on compliance, really struggle with compliance enablement in many forms, right? They struggle with the notion of, quite basic constructs, simply because historically the technology has been very disconnected, it's been very disjointed. If you think about the Azure and Microsoft 365 relationship, some of the compliance type technologies that exist in Azure exist there rather than inside 365, so that, for instance, you can consume them inside other services that aren't just 365. So the idea of being able to enable a compliance plane, for instance, rather than a compliance product or a compliance service, gives you measurable, benefit bringing governance, regardless of what you do as an organization, shape, size, etc. And then, I could build this list out forever, right? You could come up with a whole bunch of real objectives. The key thing I'm saying here is, don't think about it in the context of control. Don't think about it in the context of, management or, stuff like that. Think about it in the context of positive, user affirming, purposeful descriptions and definitions. So how do we do it? So I said at the top of the session, I'm absolutely not going to provide you a comprehensive solution. I'm not going to give you a framework. I'm not going to give you an answer, because if I'm going to do that, I'm going to damn well charge you for it, right? So what I am going to do is I'm going to walk through some broad principles of how you can start to think about governance, and then of course I'll gladly engage in further conversations in the future. In whatever context that in whatever context that might take. Time for water because my teeth are rattling. Hold on. So I want you to think about things in the context of governance, right? So many organizations just start launching out into, I apologize, I'm here in my office, rather spookily. The office door is opening, but there's nobody in the house, so I'm quite terrified as to what's doing that. I live in an old house, so who knows? The ghost of owners previous are here to get. If I suddenly vanish, shockingly off to one side of the frame, then you saw it here live. A ghost grabbed me. So the things what I want you to do is I want you to think about the context of your organization, right? So it's all very well picking up frameworks and picking up ideas and picking up maturity models and all that kind of stuff, right? But what you need to be doing is you need to be understanding how you can dock them into your organization. And there are a number of things, some of which are incredibly obvious that you need to be thinking about. Some of them are much less likely to immediately spring to the front of your mind as a candidate for consideration in the context of governance, right? And again, this list is by no means exhaustive. It's just here to get you thinking in slightly different ways, but also, as I said at the top of this, to get you thinking simply, to get you thinking about, what governance means to your organization, rather than this is how to do governance. So the first thing is to think about your licensing, right? Now, I think this is a reasonably obvious one. Many of us who understand governance from a technical perspective in the context of 365, recognize the fact that different SKUs, different license types have very wide and varied capabilities in the context of technical execution stuff. So things about, loss prevention, data governance, security compliance type stuff, depending on which license you have, as you go from, 1 to 3 to 5 and stuff like that. With a consummate rise in cost on a per seat basis, there's a consummate rise in capability and functionality that's delivered to you. When you start to think about governance, You might sit in a room with some very smart people and imagineer some very smart stuff that you want to implement without recognition and without, you know, acceptance of the fact that if you want to do that, it might cost you a ton of cash to do it, right? In my view, you know, the high value SKUs that Microsoft offer for Microsoft 365 are pretty good value for what they provide, right? There's some capabilities in there that, to all intents and purposes, can provide you with some, you know, epic levels of protection in many contexts, and epic levels of quite smart governance, and epic levels of quite smart guide railing that will help your users work without feeling as if they're being compressed in any way. But for many organizations, a jump from, you know, whatever it is, $15 a seat at E3 to 55, $60 a seat, whatever it is now for E5, that's a pretty big jump, right? And if you've got, you know, only got 20 seats, that, you know, as a cash value, it's a huge amount. It's a huge amount. If you're a very big organization, you can very quickly, you know, 3-4 times the cost of your 365 licensing, and so you need to be really understanding, you know, what you're going to get for that and why that provides value, why it's important. So I want you to really be thinking about that. Culture's the next thing, right? So many organizations, it's great, you know, in the world that I work most and spend most of my time in, with all the tanks and guns and planes and ships, right? If something needs to be done, you can pretty much, you know, from the top of the shop, somebody with the right number of Goldie things on their shoulders can pretty much tell everybody else in the organization what they want to do, right? And, you know, do this, do it by then, make it done. There are very few organizations in the world where that sort of thing is feasible or possible. You know, perhaps African warring nations is the other place where that might be possible, right? But you know, at a macro level, most organizational culture and most organizations, and I'm going to be indelicate here, you know, leaders of organizations are terrified about upsetting the workforce. Whether that's good or bad is up to you. Leaders of organizations understand that they want to drive the organization forward, but you know, they're terrified of unions, and they're terrified of, you know, falling foul of modern thinking, modern practices, all of which are broadly very positive, by the way. But it's important to understand that if you want to implement these types of changes, these types of new thinking, new methods of thinking for organizations, the culture of the organization is going to be a vital part of how you approach that, right? If you're in an organization that's used to just getting on with things, then implementing things, telling people how it works, you know, that might work for you. If you're an organization that's used to doing things by committee or is heavily unionized or something like that, can be much more complicated. You know, I've worked with organizations who've had to do things like rewrite employment contracts in order to enable the implementation of governance constructs, simply because their, you know, previous contracts or older versions of contracts had, you know, made no allowances for things like, you know, litigation holding or audit log review, or, you know, whatever it might be, you know, relevant in a given context. So, you know, think about that. You know, mapping how you want to do governance, mapping how you want to implement governance into your culture is a vital part of success. Adoption and training. You know, pretty much every paragraph you hear or see about 365 has the word adoption in it, right? You know, user adoption, you know, organizational adoption, you know, whatever it might be. It's hot stuff at the moment. Probably, you know, adoption in many respects is the new governance, right? Governance was hot a while ago. It is orbiting back now, but adoption's super hot now. And, you know, the simple fact of the matter is that you need to be thinking, you know, long and hard about how you map governance thinking into your organization, how you make it work. And, you know, you've done the cultural thing. You've thought about how your organization operates as a collective of individuals. But adoption is then about how you then actually implement that, how you actually make it happen, how you, for instance, take your user community on a journey, how you guide them towards something. You know, I used to say a lot of things like, you know, you can lead a user to SharePoint, but you can't make them think. You know, playing on the, you know, the African savannah metaphor there. And, you know, adoption of constructs such as governance can be complex. for some organizations. Organizations struggle enough as it is in many ways to introduce uplifts in technology, new things, new features. The introduction of services and capabilities such as Teams has been quite painful for many organizations. But the introduction, especially for coming from a standing start of zero governance or very little governance, especially very little technical governance, excuse me, bringing that to the user community, bringing it to bear, making it useful, making it beneficial to the organization requires a reasonable amount of thinking. I've worked with organizations who have invested, more in how they help their user community understand the benefits of governance, the wheres and whys of governance, than they've invested in training in how to use the technologies, simply because they recognize that if they can take the user, if they can bring the user along on a journey, it's powerful. We all know that the power of suggestion, the power of persuasion versus the power of compulsion, right? So if you can draw a user into your world and take them on a journey, then your likelihood of success and your likelihood of achieving those outcomes, those benefits that you've previously stated, is going to be uplifted, right? And the chances for success will increase. You need to think about who's doing what in the context of governance. I've already talked about things like unionization and committee-driven organizations, right? If your organization, if your culture is of that type, then you need to think about how you manifest that, how you express that, right? If you think about how the educational establishments work, especially here in the UK, where you have a faculty body, a teaching body, and you have management layers of heads of this and heads of that, and then you have horizontal layers of so you've got head of ages and then heads of class types, biology, physics, science, whatever, maths, whatever, and then you have pastoral care specialists and special needs specialists and a deputy head, and there's all this all this quite complicated seemingly to many disconnected, but in reality functions pretty well, right? Let's be quite frank. Our education system here in the UK, love it or hate it, does function reasonably well in the main. There's a board of governors that sits over the top in many organizations that are doing things like fiscal governance and pastoral governance, education governance, right? And the reason it works is because back in time, someone, and I'm sure somebody here, maybe even in the chat, could tell me, some clever politician in 1942 or something, here in the UK, came up with this construct of how we should have schools structured like that, and roles and responsibilities are quite clearly defined. And within the construct of junior education, secondary education, further education, whatever, those roles and responsibilities are pretty well understood. They serve purpose, and so pretty much every establishment uses them, right? For you and for how you implement governance within an organization, whether you're a small organization, 20 people who are making t-shirts and hoodies, or whether you're a large organization such as my associates that will be speaking later from DWP, which I'm guessing is pretty big, right, as an organization, right? Having a really strong view and a really balanced view on who's doing what and why, and how the user is represented, it's not even a real word, how the user is represented, how management is represented, how other communities are represented, be they external communities, be they communities that exist inside your organization, right? So just think about these things. And again, I can't give you the answer because it's different for every organization, despite what I said about education. But the key thing is that roles and responsibilities are important in this context, and it's important to ensure that every community, every group is, where appropriate, is represented, right? So because you want the voices to be balanced, you want the voices to be all able to be heard, and wherever possible and practical, to have an equal weighting associated to them. So think about that. Ponder expertise, right? One of the things that I'm constantly talking to folk about is recognition of the fact that unless you genuinely have expertise inside your organization, if you want to implement constructs such as governance, whether it's Microsoft 365 or governance for something else, you're probably going to need to either hire or contract skills to provide you with assistance, right? There's an entire industry building up around governance for Microsoft technologies. As I've mentioned earlier on, I am an owner in a company that provides software solutions for governance for 365. And a software solution like that is simply a manifestation in software of expertise, right? Historically, the sorts of things that the product does would have been done by people who had knowledge, and the idea is to be able to productize that and give that to organizations as packaged expertise, if you like. Without putting too fine a point on it, over the years, one of the reasons my professional life exists is because of being expertise and being asked to be to get involved in different organizations, different projects, different in different roles, but because I bring something that the organization doesn't have, right? That's the entire purpose of a consultant, right? Is you're bringing capability, knowledge, experience that the organization doesn't have. The thing to remember is that governance is a continuum, right? It's not a project. It's not something that you do and then 3 months later you're finished. It's like, yay, we're governed, boom. It doesn't work like that, right? Governance is a continuum. And so, do you need that expertise in-house? Do you need that expertise on contract? Do you need that expertise, twice a year, 3 times a year, whatever that might look like. So just ponder that, right? And again, I'm giving you lots of things to ponder here rather than giving you definitive things, go and do this, simply because, as I said earlier on, it's different for everybody, it's different for every organization, and expertise can accelerate you, it can prevent you from making mistakes, it can bring to bear, for instance, industry relevant experience or sector relevant experience, and give you advantage. So ponder that. In fact, somebody said to me on a session like this that I was doing to a US audience a couple of months ago, they said, we use expertise to make us better than our competitor, which I quite like, the idea of saying, well, actually, if we can make, an organization that do X, Y, Z, if we can make our governance better, then our outcome as an organization is probably going to benefit from that. And so the investment in expertise to improve governance gives us a tangible business benefit that's measurable in the bottom line. So think about stuff like that. And then the final thing, I kind of this is this is me being whimsical as much as anything else. But one of the challenges with Microsoft 365 is the sheer width of the platform, right? If you think about, if you take the word Microsoft out and just say 365, right? There's a ton of stuff there. You've got the entire Office 365 piece, you've got the Microsoft 365 piece, you've got the Dynamics piece, and you've got all these other bits and pieces. And I'm just broadly, putting a single moniker on it of calling it the power stuff, right? So power this, power that, power the other, right? Some of the power stuff that exists is truly wondrous and magical, and as with all things wondrous and magical, you've all seen the movies, right? There's usually a really big downside to wondrous and magical, right? And the power stuff is powerful. It empowers users. It gives the citizen development opportunity, all sorts of other stuff like this. But as the adage goes, with great power comes great responsibility, and governance of all of these things and all of this stuff is something that you really need to think. I work with organizations day in, day out who simply disable all this stuff because they don't want their user community, who are self-taught, Google driven developers, and all this other stuff. They don't want that community to get too much oxygen inside the organization, which may or may not be short-sighted, but I get it, right? And so you need to be thinking quite hard about, given that the Microsoft platform doesn't have a whole heap of technical governance around the Power Platforms. It is improving. At Ignite recently, they announced some interesting new governance stuff. But any of you that have ever worked with, for instance, Power Automate or stuff like that, will be well aware that it's, number one, very easy to butt up against peculiar cost scenarios. It's very easy to butt up against usage scenarios. It's very easy to butt up against, oh my God, we sent an entire list of stuff over there type scenarios, data duplication, yada, 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 right? One of the challenges associated to no code and low code versus pro code is that There's a reason pro code is called pro code, right? Is professional developers are taught, educated, and framed around the disciplines associated to building things, how to test, what's the cost, and I don't mean cost in terms of dollars, I mean the cost in terms of compute, cost in terms of storage. You know, what's the impact of doing this, what's the impact of doing that? The minute you open Pandora's box on the citizen community, everything becomes very personal, right? People start to think about what's in it for them, and they think less about the impact. You've all done it, every single person on this call, or every single person listening in the future, watching in the future. You've all sat in your car and tooted or waved or wildly gesticulated at somebody because you're worried about you, with zero consideration for why they're doing or why they've done what they've done, right? Dumb example, but you get my point. So think long and hard, right? I don't think it's necessarily a great position to say no power stuff to the user community, but you do need to think about consequence, and management of consequence is a facet of governance. Hopefully that all makes sense. Call this the secret sauce, but it's nonsensical, right? It's just self-effervescent bullshit, right? The reality is that everything that you ever do with technology should follow a pattern similar to this, right? And it maps really nicely onto governance, but it also maps onto almost everything you'll ever do in technology, right? Innovate, come up with something, inform, hand it to the users, distribute it, whatever, and then iterate. Take the feedback, go back to the top, innovate, right? Almost everything that we do with technology should follow this cycle. Is it a secret sauce? No. But for some reason, so many organizations, more IT managers, CTOs, CIOs, whatever, than I care to imagine, just lose sight of this, right? Everything that we do with technology is a continuum. It's a constant, just loop of innovate, come up with an answer, inform, distribute the answer, iterate, take the feedback, go back to the beginning, right? And if there's only one thing you take away from this session today, aside from how cool is Yoda behind me, it's this, right? It's just remember this, right? In fact, somebody on a session I did quite recently, somebody put into the chat they went to PowerPoint and they made a slide for this and said, can I please use this in a presentation I'm doing, to my entire organization to talk about what it is that IT do. As I said, it's not secret sauce, but it is life advice for technologists. I suppose you could perhaps abstract a macro away and say it's just pretty decent life advice, full stop. But in the context of what we do, and in the context zooming in a bit more in governance, innovate, come up with an answer, inform, distribute the answer, iterate, take the feedback, go back to the beginning. Can't say it enough. I could probably stop there, to be honest, but I have got a slide or two more. If you do want something that's actionable, this is it, right? Everybody's heard of the holy trinity of this, the holy trinity of that, but whatever, right? I call this the holy quintilogy for users. I'm not even sure if quintilogy is actually even a real word apart from to describe movie franchises, but the holy quintilogy, the holy Q for users in the context of governance, right? And I'm not going to tell you how to do any of these. I'm not going to say if you want to do provisioning, external access, naming conventions, privacy compliance, go off and do this and go to this, go to this screen in 365 and this screen in Azure, or go and buy Provision Point, or go and buy another tool, right? What I'm going to say to you is that these are the 5 things that potentially give you relatively simple to implement, relatively simple to explain, the low-hanging fruit, if you will, right? The first thing is think about how you're going to do provisioning. And what I mean by that is how users can create stuff inside 365, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be down to the level of how they create documents, because then you get into the whole, should they be using templates? Should they be using content types, metadata, right? bare minimum, think about workspace provisioning. How can people create groups, teams, sites, subsites, planner plans, Yammer communities, whatever, right? Help people understand that when they create something, the second before they create it, they should have an understanding of when they're going to get rid of it, right? Help people to understand what provisioning means, right? What it is, right? If you have opportunities to automate using tools, using your own stuff, using DevOps, whatever, go for it. Fantastic, right? But the creation of stuff, having parameters and guide rails around that is incredibly useful. I remember a few years ago, I was working with a customer, about 100,000 users, 500,000 site collections. And the reason was because there was zero framing around how they could and couldn't create things. And so they just used to endlessly create things. I need a thing for a thing, and so here it is, bam. Without realizing that there's already a thing for a thing over there, or there's a thing for a thing that you should be using, whatever. And so you end up with the problem that we're all familiar with back in the day, NTFS file shares, where it says company, sales, projects, customer, company, sales, projects, the same customer. You end up with these peculiar, there's stuff everywhere problems. Think about external access, right? External access, guest access, whatever, right? Some of the great functionality that's now given to you in the 365 platform allows you to collaborate, communicate externally to the organization. For some organizations, that is definitely a step too far. Some organizations, they love it. They find it empowering, they find it liberating, right? Just think about what that looks like. Think about what guidance you need to apply. Should you have, for instance, if somebody wants to create a team with external access, does there need to be an approval loop for that to say, yes, the type of content that's going in here should be allowed to be externally shared, right? Think about these sorts of things, because compromise, even without complex and sophisticated data loss prevention and data governance tooling available in more expensive SKUs, fundamentally basic changes to how your users do things and how things can be created and how access can be granted can provide you with a safety net that might be useful to the organization. Naming conventions is one of my favorite ones, right? Because we've all been there, right? We've all walked into either a new job or as a consultant, a new customer, and you've seen, test team 1, test team 2, and sales site 1, and and all that kind of stuff, right? You can take that pain away from the user community, and you can provide relatively simple guidance, relatively simple mechanisms. There's some tooling natively built into the platform, or you can use external products to do it. Just provide common sense naming conventions to let the user who you are. I always used to say that you name things for the user who you will be in 6 months, not the user that you are today. It's an old developer thing where, comment code for the developer that you are in 6 months time, because when you go back to that code and look at it, it'll take you 2 hours to figure it out. If it's beautifully commented, it'll take you 2 seconds to figure it out, right? The same thing can be said across your entire user community. The other benefit of naming conventions is it helps prevent things like sprawl, and it helps provide better guidance around how you do things like provisioning. If your naming convention is common sense driven, then your user the user community is way more likely to find an existing workspace rather than to try and create a new workspace. Go figure. Think about privacy. Privacy is an emotive word because it means lots of things to lots of different people. But what I mean by this is, think about how information can be shared both internally and externally to your organization. So this is subtly different from external access, because external access can be done at quite arbitrary levels for certain types of workspaces. Privacy can be as simple as things like, individual documents that are available, the use of things like private channels. So for instance, for me, philosophically speaking, the concept of a private channel inside a team I find jarring, right? There's no privacy, there's no private in team. That doesn't work, but whatever, right? Those two things jar for me, but I understand why it's beneficial. I understand why it's useful. You don't want directors' salaries.xlsx to appear all over the place in a search result. You want to be able to put it, and keep those sorts of things confidential. Perhaps in many respects, what I'm talking about here is not necessarily privacy; it's confidentiality. But I'll let you, marinate on that and philosophize about that to your heart's content. And then the final thing is really just think about compliance. What I mean by that is just think about there's anything that it is necessary for you to be doing, right? So don't think about the future of desired state. I'm talking about what is necessary for you to be doing, because from a quick win perspective or from a risk management perspective, being able to enable some form of governance that gives you a level of compliance that is required. I'll use some slightly ridiculous examples, but if you're in healthcare in the USA, you need HIPAA, right? If you're in the EU or interacting with private citizens in the EU, you need to be cognizant of GDPR, right? If you're in the UK, you need to be cognizant of things like Data Protection Act and stuff like that, right? So just there might be some very low-hanging fruits. I think that's the third or fourth time I've said that in this session, so I apologize for that. It's just an awful expression. Whenever I find the IBM person that first said that, I will cut their fruit off. Think about what that means, and think about what the instant opportunity is. Think about what the instant gratification opportunity is in the context of compliance. How you could perhaps simply apply some governance, or simply apply something simple, bit of a clunky sentence, around giving you something that's immediately satisfying, that's immediately beneficial to the organization. And then over time, think harder about what compliance means in a broader context. So that's the Holy Quint. Epically conscious about the fact that I overrun on everything I ever do, so I'm epically conscious to not overrun today, because I know that Chirag likes everything done tip-top and Bristol fashion. He rang me 6 or 7 times before I was due to join the call to make sure that I was going to join the call, so I know he likes it absolutely pendulum style. So let's kind of go to an end, right? Let's go to an end point, right? So the first thing is think about things, right? Think about what's going on in your world. Think about how governance could benefit you. Think about the sorts of things that you could be doing in a governance context. Think about the sorts of things that are available to you in the technology, the sorts of things that would work for you culturally, how you would make things work from an adoption context, yada yada. But do not overthink it, right? You've all heard expressions like KISS, keep it stupidly simple, or keep it simply stupid, or whatever that stands for, right? Don't overthink it, right? Because I promise you, analysis paralysis will stop you in your tracks in the context of governance if you try too hard and you overthink too much, right? You need to do thinking, because what you don't want to do is chop and change what you've implemented, right? But don't overthink it. It's more beneficial to you, for instance, to act on the Holy Quint, my second bullet here, than it is to sit there and endlessly think. I've worked with organizations, and especially in defense, aerospace, aviation, those sorts of organizations, heavily regulated spaces, where they think for years about governance, and then all they end up implementing is stuff that's in the box of the tool that they use. Could have done that in 5 days. You don't need 2.5 years to think about that, right? Second point here, as I've already mentioned, act on it, right? So act on the Holy Quintilogy. There's a reason that I've kind of identified those 5 things. And if you look at some of the other frameworks that exist around the world for governance, mine isn't a framework. Mine's just some broad, general and generic advice. Those sorts of things, think about provisioning, think about disposal, think about life cycle. I'm just using slightly different words to the ones I used earlier on. But just act on them, because some of them can just be switched on inside the platform with a flick of a switch, no license cost, just flick a switch and off you go, right? Some of them might require a bit more thinking, some of them might require license, specific license types, whatever. The point is, most of it's fairly simple to act on, and much of it, especially if the culture of your organization is right and your strategy for adopting new things in your organization is nailed on, you can implement a ton of stuff without really having to change a lot, which is I accept that that's a slightly peculiar thing to say, but what I mean is you can implement something just through effective communication, effective coordination, and effective collaboration without having to flick switches and pull levers inside the Office 365 admin center. So ponder that. Think about your needs. I've kind of said this over and over again as a hidden message. One day I'll figure out how to get OBS to do a flash of a message every 10th frame for 1/5 of a frame or something. Just think about your needs, right? If there's one thing you do, I kind of said about innovate, inform, iterate. Right, the innovate bit of that is determining need is definitely there. It's definitely front and center in the context of innovate. Right, I would challenge you to the fact that most organizations, and I've already spelled out my caveat around heavily regulated and stuff like that. But most organizations, the Pareto law really does apply when it comes to things like governance, right? You can do a small amount of thinking, a small amount of needs determination, and get 80% of what you need for relatively low cost of investment, relatively low investment of time, relatively low impact to the user's day-to-day life, etc., right? And then that 20%, if you want to chase it, that's your business. Hire some expertise, chase it, go for it. If you can get yourself to 100% position, freaking awesome, right? But no harm, no foul if you don't. For most organizations, even if you travel 20%, 30%, 40%, even up to 50%, right? You want to start thinking about, looking at constructs such as maturity models. That's absolutely fine. And even if you only ever make it to step 2 on a maturity model, you might look up at the lofty height of step 5. But even if you only get to somewhere like step 2, that's better than being at step 0, right? So work out what's appropriate for your organization, work out what works for you, work out what will give you the best bang for your buck, right? If you can figure out simple stuff that costs you nothing, that gives you a bunch of stuff, do that, right? To do that is the 4th point. Just execute, right? It's better to do something than to do nothing. It's better to do something simple, that's effective, that has purpose, that isn't boiling an ocean, right? Just do something, right? You'll hear people like me talk all the time about, don't boil the ocean and don't do this and don't do that and don't do the other, right? I'm not really a don't kind of person. What I am is a do kind of person, right? Do, execute. Just do a little bit of thinking, think about the quintilogy, think about how that translates onto your needs, how your organization would benefit, and then just damn well do it, right? You can put together a half-decent scope, a half-decent plan, and a half-decent execution in a few months, even if you're a giant organization, if you've got a large enough set of stones to try it, right? That's what it boils down to. That's it, right? I promised Chirag that I would finish on time. To the second, I have finished on time, according to my clock here that says 16:59:52. Those are that's my details there. So seb@provisionpoint.com, or you can get me at seb@sebmatthews.net. Google Bing me, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all the usual places, Instagram. One of the great things about being a technology early adopter is on all the platforms, Seb Matthews is who I am. I'm not, Seb M14293. I'm, in there front and center. And hopefully you found that session useful. I'll make sure that Chirag has a copy of the slides for the user group site. And pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks, Seb. Really great session. From a governance perspective, I think you cut it straight, like none of the techie stuff, and just kind of say how it is, in terms of high level and what to think about. And there's plenty to think about. Yeah, really great session, and thanks for being here. And obviously, like you mentioned as well, it's an update because yes, over the years, not just with SharePoint or any other systems in Microsoft space, but even outside of that, the fundamental principles still remain the same, right? In terms of what's in it for the users. So, yeah, and absolutely good. I'll give a couple of minutes or so just for questions to come in. So for the attendees, top right, if you just click on the question mark icon, and then you can just feel free to ask any question. No such thing as daft question, just bring them in. But I have a couple of questions, if that's all right, Seb.
Absolutely.
What I find is, because when I visit a lot of organizations and, albeit, limited IT staff they have, or they're trying to get up and running so quickly and fast, especially with Teams and everything else around it. What I tend to find sometimes is that it's the technical people sometimes who's trying to drive the governance aspects of it, and not necessarily they're wearing the right hat, but they kind of understand the fundamentals around it, how things should be done. So I know you kind of touched some points earlier, but what would your advice be around that, to kind of making sure that that's as pragmatic as possible for orgs to kind of get into that governance piece?
That's a good question, actually. The practical reality, the pragmatic reality is that for most organizations, and you kind of specifically contextualized around smaller organizations there, for most smaller organizations, the horse has to be right for the course, right? And if the IT folk are certainly in their own minds in the center of the organization, and they're interfacing out to all the other pieces, then they might actually be the most appropriate group, and in order to kind of drive the thinking and drive the context and the narrative around governance. One of the things I find interesting about IT folk is often they're berated because they're technical and they don't get what the business wants, right? But an IT, a technologist's job is to translate what the business wants into technology, right? So if they're so terrible at what they're doing for your organization, then you should be firing them and getting a whole bunch of new technologists in, right? So I find that for for many organizations, the IT people actually do end up being a decent center point, the kind of hub in the center of the organization. The bit that matters is kind of what I touched on earlier on with roles and responsibilities. Is it doesn't matter really who drives it, right? It can be the T-boy at the very bottom of the tree, of the pile that drives it, right? It doesn't really matter. What matters is representation, right? What matters is ensuring that the communities are being involved, that the communities are being engaged. It doesn't matter who's in charge, right? I was working with an organization the other day, talking with an organization the other day, and they had a role of chief governance officer, and the chief governance officer was different every month. And what they did was they literally ran an internal 16,000 people. They literally ran an internal lottery for anybody that wanted to do it to be the chief governance officer for a month, and it was a fantastic idea. Because what it did was it kept the thinking fresh, it got the business engaged, it got the organization engaged. And what's interesting about that is that concept would scale from a very small number of people up to millions of people in an organization. Is to say, okay, it's a four person business, right? Today, quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, that's who the chief governance officer is. Get on and do it, right? And follow Seb's guidance for just getting on and do it. So that would be my thinking at a high level. Clearly there's a much more sophisticated and clever answer I could give that's relevant to large organizations that want to do governance at scale. But I think horses always has to be right for the courses, right? So
good stuff. Great. No, thanks. I think, and I'll probably just leave it at that, because I know this and this is my part going over the time, and like you mentioned earlier, it's all about meeting governance, right? But yeah, just big thanks, and really hope to see you soon. I think especially with current conditions, hopefully we'll be able to come out in a few months. I think hopefully there's a community event happening in London area or something like that.
There is, and I won't pimp it until we know for sure when it is.
So that's a great thing.
The minute we get it finalized, etc. I'll let you know, and of course everybody from the user group is more than welcome to come and join us. There'll be free beer, because there's always free beer, and other drinks are available. Can't wait to see you in person.
Great to hear. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, and listen, I think I'll let you go now, and I think for the attendees, if you do think about any of the questions, then feel free to pop them in the Q&A. And so what we'll do is welcome everyone to M365 UK. For those of you who missed Seb's session, we had a great session, really kind of covered all perspectives of governance, and the recordings, the slides will be made available on Friday. So watch out for the links on the M365 UK Twitter account, and I'll post the links soon in the Q&A window as well. So with that, let's welcome the second session, which is basically all about Teams adoption story at Department for Works and Pensions, which is the biggest public service department in the UK government. And so I think back in October, if you didn't get a chance to watch, or there's a YouTube video available, then the folks at Simity here, Lesley and the team, did a great job of what they've done to set out to roll out, and then they've obviously gone further from where they were, which was 20,000 to now about 100,000 or probably more now. So I'll probably wait for that in terms of what we get from that. But yeah, I just want to welcome Lesley, who's kind of really all change champion adoption person, if you like, in terms of in the community and worked on various projects over the years. And then we have Stephen Wade, who works with Department for Works and Pensions. So he's a Teams product manager there for about a year and a half. So kind of, if you like, the great team that they have there. And obviously, you got Lee Ford, who's a solution architect at Simity, and obviously he's got some demos around the aspects of it. So yeah, I think without further ado, I'll let it over to you, Lesley, and welcome to M365 UK.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes, all good.
Full screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Of course, we have no idea who is joining at the moment and what kind of like level that you are. So I think there's hopefully be something here for everyone, depending on who kind of like your knowledge around Teams. We're going to be sharing an awful lot, so hold on to your hats. So our agenda is, as we've already been given the introduction, Stephen Wade's going to kick off. He's the Teams product manager at DWP. He's going to have a good 10 minutes, and then what we want you to invite you to do is if you've got some questions around what Stephen has shared, then pop them in the chat, and then we're going to kind of like do a quick maybe couple of minutes and answer those questions. Then we're going to go on to Lee, our solutions architect again, and if you've got any questions for Lee, then put in the chat, point them out to question for Lee, and then we go on to kind of like my piece, which is around well, it's Stephen's and my piece around adoption, and that should take about 20 minutes. And again, call out our names on the in the chat, so so Chirag knows who to go to, and we could have a bit of time at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen.
Afternoon, everyone. Yes, so thanks for the introduction, Lesley. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit from our kind of part one, as mentioned earlier, where we came in October, and mentioned where we were up to in October time. So at that point in time, we're still very much in islands mode. So we had best part of 35,000 colleagues on Teams in some form, but very much still Skype for business first and foremost in terms of the environment. And we were very much getting momentum and early adopters in that Teams community. We had done best part of 250 training sessions. That was kind of instructor led from the guys at Simity. But it was very much, we were making progress, we were getting there. It was a big undertaking. We were introducing different building blocks in terms of layering different features in, not to be too overwhelming. And it was very much an environment where kind of adverse to change, that everything had to be kind of commented out appropriately. We couldn't go too fast. We didn't want to overwhelm people, but equally we wanted to keep that momentum, create that noise in terms of getting people interested in the new cultural and technology focused change that was coming their way. So that's where we were at in part one. Still very much successful. We had a lot of interest and a lot of traction at that point. So now in part two, we've kind of built upon that. We speak today where we've got over 105,000 active users. That has very much been driven from a kind of an instructor-led and pioneer community-led adoption approach, where we were cascading new features, cascading new ideas and challenges out there, really creating that noise. And there's various conversations that we had where whether people were talking about Teams initially in a good light or a bad light, that they would prefer to keep Skype for business, as long as they were talking about Teams, it was developing that momentum, it was developing that conversation where people would go in and try and do their own research or do their own conversation about Teams. And that creating that conversation, creating that noise gave us the route in to drive that momentum. So with this kind of second part, we've now increased that to kind of over 500 live sessions. This is again instructor and on-demand led, where we've said whether you're brand new to Teams or if you are well established, you've used it elsewhere in other departments or businesses, we've got a training course for you. So it ranges from getting started to team owners wanting to find out more, all the various different capabilities, we catered for their needs. So there was no excuse why people couldn't get upskilled. And that's kind of led to best part of 40,000 people attending one of our training sessions via Simity, and we've had over 130,000 views on our stream service in terms of all our training content. So as we said today, just before Christmas, we managed to switch over to Teams only mode and say goodbye finally to Skype for Business. And now it's been about driving that momentum, layering it up, adding new features so it keeps that momentum, creates that forever developing culture where we don't kind of take a breath and sit and do nothing for 6 months, very much what Seb was referring to earlier, where it was very much driving momentum, do something rather than kind of worry about it, come up with an idea and deliver it. So we're plowing on now with deployment of over 80,000 voice enablement, so people have soft phone and kind of voice calling plans now, and Teams will very much become their main application, whether it's from collaboration or various forms of communication. And this is all being supported and provisioned via some in-house learning pathways. So we've took that idea from kind of Microsoft Learn and the previous kind of GitHub version of learning pathways, done our own in-house where we have dedicated routes and modules for people to learn at their own pace. Again, kind of almost a carbon copy of Microsoft Learn in terms of you enroll on a kind of a pathway and you do modules and you get achievements during that. We've done our own version in-house, just leveraging all the on-demand and recordings that Simity have done for us, repackage them up, and that's been very much a success in terms of driving that momentum going forward. So that's kind of what we've achieved since that October bit. So just if you want to go back on to the next slide, Lesley. Just to kind of highlight how successful it's been, there's a few stats and some quotes that we've got here. So what we did is, rather than it be just kind of technology led or kind of people like myself praising how well it's gone and how well users have understood it, we've done an element of kind of user feedback where we've spoken to people that we've supported doing live virtual events, whatever it may be, and captured their success stories so that it's not just like to myself or people from Simity to say this has gone really well. We've got a library of success stories that people can read at their own leisure and learn from each other in terms of things going well. So we've got everything from ranging from cost savings where people kind of before COVID would hire a conferencing suite and spend thousands of pounds getting people to travel to a location. They've been able to do these virtual events via Teams and save the department a load of money. Ranging from them sort of big events to the really personal stories where by showcasing accessibility tools within Teams, we have some accessibility users that have reached out to us and kind of said now they actually feel part of the department. They feel closer to their managers. They're being able to have effective and structured one-to-ones because of the accessibility tools that Teams offers. And that's really rewarding in terms of seeing that it's great that you turned it on. We've got all these stats about how widely it's being used, but the success stories really kind of switch people's focus that it's about a culture, it's about the organization, not just something that's new and shiny and new technology to play with. It's very much about the people, very much about embracing that new collaborative culture. And just some of the stats there that we put together just to show how widely it's being used now. Last 30 days alone, over 3 million meetings being held and conducted, just under 45 million messages being sent across channels and private messages, and over 9 million calls. So it's now very much front and center of what the department does, and people have very much forgotten Skype for Business, which is great to hear from our point of view. So that's just a few stats and a few stories from our point of view. So that's us in terms of what we've achieved, and I know leading into what Lesley's going to cover shortly, it's all been about that adoption, empower people to do that kind of train the trainer concept and cascade that knowledge down and share that success. So I'll hand you back over to Lesley at that point.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Right, we're going to have Lee taking over now. We're just going to switch slides, and I'm going to just share again. Just had a stop press moment.
I think it should be okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. I'm guessing it's probably afternoon for most people. My name is Lee Ford. I'm a solution architect for Vicinity. I have been working with DWP as long as probably for about a year or so, along with other organisations on helping them to move to Teams, make the most of Teams, and make sure it's a success. But today I'm going to talk about Teams extensibility, and I put extensibility in quotes here because it's not a term that everybody may know or know what it means in the context of Teams. So extensibility effectively is extending the functionality that you have within Teams. So the core functionality, you have what Teams can do out of the box, so to speak, and then you can extend and add features and add line of business applications and lots of different things, and that's what I'm going to be covering here. So I'm going to talk about the extensibility, how we can extend the capability of Teams, and an example of how that works, or an example of something you can do within Teams to extend it from what it is out of the box. So if you want to move to the next slide, please, Lesley. So before we talk about Teams, if we take a step back for a second and think about where we were before Teams, Skype for Business, beloved by many. It was a great tool for chat and instant message, for meetings, ad hoc meetings, organised meetings, collaboration, sharing files or joining a persistent chat. Those all worked and they were great. But from an extensibility point of view, it was a little bit limited. You could, there was an SDK and you could kind of put things together, but it wasn't the same as what we see in Teams. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage of where we are with Teams and how far we've come from where we were with Skype for Business. So if we quickly move to the next slide, Lesley, thank you. So what can it do better than Skype for Business from an extensibility point of view? So when you think of Teams, if someone say, oh, what do you do in Teams? The first things that are probably going to come into your mind are being able to message people or chat messages one-to-one, maybe a group, maybe a Teams channel, a collaboration, having meetings, having live events, video conferencing, all that sort of stuff. Teams is great at that, and we all know that, and that's what we're using now to have this session. So that's kind of a known quantity. And when you think about it, you think, well, actually, a lot of that can be done in Skype for Business, or could be done in Skype for Business. And where Skype for Business differs from Teams, in my opinion, or the biggest differentiator is not all kind of the background blur and all the other bits of functionality that are there. It's actually making it a more, I guess, wider reaching application. It kind of serves a lot more purposes. So if we now go on to the next slide. So when Teams is not just Teams, so we've talked about what it's great at and what it can do out of the box. And for me, a real game changer, or kind of something that sets it apart from Skype for Business and other traditional sort of conferencing and calling platforms, is the fact that you can extend it quite heavily. And the way it's done mainly is around applications. So it has its own app store, and this app store can include published apps from third parties, like known third parties, so Zoom or WebEx or Zoho, or whatever. That is all built in. You can do that today, and then what you can also do on top of that is then add your own applications. Maybe there's something you developed yourself, maybe it's a third party that's developed something for you, and all of a sudden Teams doesn't just become a calling and meeting platform. It becomes your workspace, really. So the way I think of it is almost is the operating system. So you're going from having lots of different applications running on your machine to actually just doing everything within Teams. And now with the ability to be able to pop out windows, you can almost have the different apps that's serviced in Teams and pop them out to different windows, and all of a sudden it kind of feels a bit more like an operating system than it did when it was kind of a single screen and you could only do one thing at a time. So for me, apps do absolutely change the game for Teams. It makes it much more flexible, and if there's something that you thought, oh, it'd be cool if we could do this in Teams, then there's probably already someone working on it. So if we now go on to the next slide, please, Lesley. So here's just one example of Teams extensibility that I've been working on, and I'll quickly walk you through the scenario. So what we have is, obviously we're all in a pandemic at the moment. We've been in it for about a year now, and several large UK government organisations that are using Teams basically they need to come up with a plan on how do we get people to return to an office safely, but also how do we make it easy for them to use, so it's not another app they've got to download on their phone, or another app they've got to install on the machine, or a website they've got to go to with a separate account, they've got to log in, and all of a sudden, people are going to go, oh, this is too much effort to kind of use. I'll just stay at home and not go in, or I'm just going to go in and not bother booking, or being tracked. So what we're trying to do is make it so that it's a couple of clicks and someone's got a desk. So what we've got here is using a Teams personal app. We've pinned it on the left-hand side under desk booking, and effectively what that allows us to do is click on the link, and then as you can see, the bottom right, we've got a bot, and it's basically asking you some questions and making sure you agree to safe working practices and who are you booking for? Are you booking for yourself, or are you booking for a visitor, or are you booking for another employee? And it kind of walks you through the questions and what location do you want to be at, and do you have any accessibility requirements? Do you need a wheelchair, accessible desk? Do you need a standing desk? And effectively, it ends up with the user being assigned a desk. And then from there, we can effectively ask the users to check in. And as you can see in the the booking details section there, we can see the check-in status, and from that information, by having users check in, we can kind of almost trace where people have been, how often people are actually making a booking and they're not turning up, or how many people were in an office when there was potentially an issue with an outbreak of coronavirus. Then all of a sudden, it makes it a lot easier, rather than kind of just allowing people to return but not really tracking it. So the question is, why do we do this in Teams? Why we could have done any other? Maybe there's some off-the-shelf products that already do some of this. And what it came down to was that everyone uses Teams already. Everyone knows how it works. Everyone knows how it looks and feels. They haven't got to have a separate account to sign in. It's easy to use, and it integrates with other Microsoft products. So things like Exchange. So when someone's making a booking for a desk, it's also adding a calendar entry so that they can come back and see, oh yes, I've got a booking tomorrow. So that's just one example of extensibility that we've been working on, at least, that all of a sudden it just becomes part of Teams. And the feedback we've had from users is it's great that it's in Teams. I can access it on my mobile, on my PC, and it just works, and that's awesome. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Chirag, are there any questions for Stephen or Lee at this point?
No, none so far.
Okay, I will carry on then. So we're going to take you into the adoption side of it. So as Seb mentioned, this is the importance of the adoption and training journey. So we built out the champions community, and the internal name for the champions community that they they created themselves internally was Pioneers, and I just thought this was absolutely the perfect name for them. So it's about, the mission was motivating and inspiring the adoption of teams in DWP, and I have a blue love heart on there. It should really be a purpley blue love heart, but it was overlaying all of this, the idea of all of this, with the kind of like the concept and the philosophy of empathy, which I did feel a bit uncomfortable when I started introducing it, and you'll see this on the next slide, that it's not the sort of thing that you talk about in a big public sector department, but I think it really did make a difference when we started to get to know the pioneers in this champions community. So we ended up with this 3-step approach that all of the pioneers went through, and I think we ended up with well over 100, which is a big number in its own right, but kind of like in an organisation that's got over 100,000 members of staff, it's actually a really small number. But some of those people had quite a big reach across the UK. There were people that were representing the 800 plus job centres, so they did have quite a big reach. So we ran. I facilitated with someone from Stephen's team. So there was Danielle Johnson, Upal, Aparna Upal, and Stephen Wade and myself. I facilitated all the sessions. I always had one of them with me just to help answer those internal questions that I wouldn't really know as a consultant, not working there all the time. So we ran 16 discovery sessions, and then usually after that session was complete, we would invite them if they would like to join the next session, which was the Go Beyond session, and then we did this adoption clinic. So the discovery workshop was taking those high-end users that were identified in the analytics of Microsoft Teams to come along to the discovery workshop. So they didn't all have to come. If they were already really a high-end user and kind of like regarded as a champion, it was up to them if they wanted to come along to these sessions. It wasn't forced upon them by their bosses or anyone like that. And the agenda, as we kind of went through in part 1 back in October, was introducing the pioneers to this kind of like vision of teams in DWP, new habits and behaviours. There was a bit of ad card change management in there, the idea of what growth mindset means, which is a big which was really developed, well, it was a culture that which has been made by part of Microsoft now, and it's a whole subject in itself. And again, this idea of empathy. So growth mindset is really just forever. You're always interested in learning and developing yourself with a view that it can help others as well. So we gave them a preview. We kind of dangled a carrot of the resources that were available in Teams for them. So Stephen created a Pioneers Hub in SharePoint, and he embedded that into the Pioneers team site. So we kind of like gave them a preview of all of the resources that were there, and I will be sharing some of those with you as we go through the rest of the session here. We did once we I took them through kind of like all these new ways of working, and this idea of change, some idea of change management as well. We opened up the whiteboard, and we did a whiteboard session with sticky notes to give them again an idea of what's available to them in Teams that they might not have tried before, that they could use with their colleagues. So they had to play with the whiteboard, and what we asked them to do was 2 exercises. Help visualize. The first exercise was to help them visualize how far they've come already using Teams over that kind of like 3-month period, and we wanted them to share with us what they've already started to use in Teams, and think about their old story, what they were doing maybe 3-4 months before, and now what they're doing and what they're getting really excited about, and what they're doing really well. And that gave us the context for the workshop, which was called Go Beyond. So I'll cover that in a second. And then another little exercise that we asked them to do after that one was what features and apps might they try after what I'd previously shared and shown them around in the SharePoint site that were now available to them. Again, like whiteboard, maybe tasks in Planner and things like OneNote. Tasks in Planner and To Do, I think that's the name for it. It's quite a long name for an app. Hopefully Microsoft will change that soon. But that's really picked up in DWP. Lots of the pioneers had already started to use that. And there's been some really fantastic stuff about how Planner and Tasks has been picked up. So after the session of discovery, we immediately sent out a Microsoft form to capture what they thought of the session, because this was such a new concept. We were tweaking the session the whole time and making it, just making it better the whole time along after, going through those 16 sessions. And also on the form, we asked them, would you like to sign up to the Pioneers program and come along to the Go Beyond workshop and then really share your story with us? We also said to them at this point, once you've signed up to the program, you will be given access to the team site for the pioneers, and you will also be given a digital badge. And we think that was the sweetener. But as Stephen said to me, they love a badge in DWP. So we had I think it was about 90% uptake of everyone that came through that discovery workshop. We've all said we definitely want to come back. I don't think it was just the badge. I think they were obviously really keen and just were interested in the next step for it. So the next about 5 days, we kept it quite close together. After they'd been through the discovery workshop, they got an invite to the Go Beyond workshop. And this was about them again going into a lot more detail about how they were already using Teams. So these sessions were for no more than 6 or 7 people. That's why there's quite a few more sessions than the first workshop. And this was an opportunity for us to really get to know them and for them to get to know us, that there is, this feeling of empathy where they can, a place that they can come to with a small group of people that can help them along the way. So we asked them to we sent them a template form where it was about basically sharing their story. So it took them from their old story to where they are now. And also we allowed them to, if they wanted to, do a screen share and show us their teams. And that was where it was absolutely mind-blowing on what some of these people were now doing in Teams. And these are people that have been working in perhaps DWP for 20, 30 years and were so passionate about their new way of working during a pandemic. It was absolute joy to run these sessions and meet these people. So we also asked them what more support they might need, and that took us into the adoption clinics. That gave us the context around how can we help them further. So we introduced this idea, this is where we were introducing this idea of empathy. So it's to understand the feeling of others who might be experiencing a degree of anxiety due to perhaps new ways of working. And that's what we wanted to get them to kind of help them share that idea with their colleagues, not to feel like they are the people that are there to take on all the training aspects of thousands of people that they might be as champions being that they think that they need to support. We were just asking them as pioneers to point their colleagues in the right direction to get the training that Simity were running, these leader-led training sessions, and then they've ended up as on-demand sessions as well. Point them to the SharePoint sites that were there that had all the training in there for them. It's kind of like to point them in the right direction. So I take you into the training that we ran through with them. So it's ended up becoming the 8 Teams pain points, how to heal them, and then we've ended up with kind of this traffic light approach of Go Teams. So the 8 pain points that we heard from kind of surveying the champions was around cultural change resistance, how to access Teams. They were going through Skype for Business transition to Teams, which has now been complete for them. So that was cut off in January. But at the time we were running this training, they still had a good 2 or 3 months to go. So people were reverting back to what they know. How to actually, entering Teams meetings, which has now been improved, using less email, more Teams, managing their notifications, managing channel conversations and chat, and then just the whole file management piece around SharePoint. So those were the main main pain points and challenges. So within the cultural change resistance, we heard that mostly these, how many have we got here? Seven issues that were coming up around, 7 challenges that were coming up around actual kind of like the resistance of this new culture. So there was stuff around upskilling. There's an apathy about I just don't like it. I don't trust Microsoft Teams. Digital literacy issues, a lack of vision. There was general inability to see how teams might improve their work. Collaboration, I don't want my work to be made visible until it's finished and approved, that kind of old school approach. And then just a general sharing something that might get me into trouble or make me look stupid. And then just kind of like just a general just an overwhelmed feeling of these technical upgrades. But what I kind of like went into and asked Stephen's team, what is the core values of DWP? What's the organisational culture? Which is culture can be is kind of like referred to as how the way we do things around here. So they came back with these 4 core values, which I expect are out on the on their intranet. But usually in every organisation, you have your core values around trust, goals, teamwork, responsibility, customers, ethics, and innovation. And this is forward-thinking, visionary. The vision of an organisation, a modern workplace. So my guide to you is look at your core values, look at your vision statement, and see if you can match up to the fabulous ways and features and applications of working in teams. And that could be a way to encourage your employees to, to get their heads around, changing their behaviours into new ways of working. So in here as well, we introduce them to the change curve of resistance. This is basically a change curve that's used to help understand any dramatic life-changing situation that goes on. So we've just gone through this as a major example in our private lives through the pandemic, in our personal life, of wearing face masks. That on the left there, the shock and disbelief of having to wear face masks over the last year. But over time, over the last year, it's now become understandable. It's sustainable. If you want to go shopping, you need to put your face mask on. So what we found where we started to build up the Pioneers program is that the logo there of the 3 little people on the integrate side of those of the green side of the change curve, that's where we were positioning the change champions. But we were basically saying to them, because they were coming out with such amazing success stories, but we explained to them, we are looking to you to help your colleagues shift up that change curve. So we positioned the rest of DWP basically down on this, the negotiate and the indifferent side of it. And that's because as well, Skype was still with them. So we were kind of basically saying, this is where we need to take you out. And these slides as well, this was about, as I said, it's this training in the adoption clinic. It's kind of like after the training, we shared the slides with them and basically said, these are there for you to use them. You might not be comfortable maybe talking about something like this, take them out, put in there what you need. If there's maybe a subject that we haven't covered, then add it in, make this training your own. And all of the slides had the whole slide deck has got a script for it. So as I said, we started to gather a fantastic team success stories. Stephen mentioned them in his at the beginning of this session. This is one of the early ones that we helped develop, and that came out of that kind of like the Go Beyond session. So it's telling the old stories, it's kind of using persona profiling as well, and it's also on there you can see the products. This story is about Teams, Planner and OneNote, but they've got now I think about 30 success stories within DWP. So we took them into how to access Teams, all the different ways of pointing that out to them, including the mobile app. This is now this is no longer an issue. Skype has disappeared, but what I introduced here was basically what Lee was basically telling us about was the insights around extensibility. So you had Skype with just calling chat meetings, which works absolutely fine, but when you go into using Teams, and with this iceberg analogy, which I love, that you've got the iceberg, you know, above the waterline of the water, and then below there you've got all of this massive piece of ice that you can't see, and under there that's where SharePoint is. You've got applications like OneNote and Tasks and Planner, and also, you know, the latest in the last month or so with what's coming out with Microsoft Viva. That is everything that, you know, and more, that you're getting through the lens of Teams. So you could kind of like take this into the whole collaboration space now, above, you know, what Skype was giving them. And I've got on here the reason why collaborate, and it's kind of like me, my team and my organisation. So I collaborate as need others to help me achieve a wider goal that I can't deliver myself. I collaborate as part of a team, as I believe it's an essential part of our culture and not something limited to solving a particular problem. And then I collaborate as work in an organisation that supports innovation, empowerment, diversity and inclusion. So you can find that what does, you know, it can be hard to sometimes like describing what culture means. This I hope will help you, maybe give you a good descriptor on what actually collaboration means. So we've got team meetings, the issue there of, you know, people were saying in the, you know, 4 or 5 months ago that, you know, there were issues, they were still getting used to working from home. So we gave them a good guide on you know, this check your device settings for a level playing field experience prior to joining. And when we talked about level playing field, it didn't matter if someone worked at a job centre or they were a senior leader. Once you start joining that meeting, as we've all done, you know, joining any meetings on Zoom, you're all on Zoom or anything like that, you're all going in there, doesn't matter who you are, you've got to make sure that you've got your profile device settings and your camera is switched off until you nearly need to be on camera, or you're unmuted or muted. You might need to blur your background, add your own background image. And then once you're in there, you've got, you know, the share tray, the whiteboard, chat, polls and gifts. You can raise your hand, you've got breakout rooms, and you can record. So it's just giving them an idea of all the different things they can do once they get into Teams. Then we've got these questions here about, you know, Skype versus Teams versus email. So we kind of walk them through the benefits, the pros and cons of using email against using Skype. And I'm not going to go, there is a script for this, but I'm not going to go deeply into this, because I'm sure the people on this that have joined us will appreciate the differences. But Teams ticks, you know, all the boxes there. And the key one is, I think, from those in you know, thousands of people using Skype in DWP, was if they use chat, then once they close the chat message down, they lost the chat. But with Teams, the beauty of it is you've got that retention period. For DWP, it's 30 days, and the chat the conversation continues, which has been really very, very useful for them. So there was people complaining about managing chat and activity notifications. So we've got Outlook notifications and team alerts can be annoying, and they're still saying here that they need to use, I've forgotten what the word was there. What am I talking about? Yeah, needs to use email. So with the guide that's been given within DWP is email's not going away. You still need it for external third parties. You need it perhaps to do deeper work with shared links, maybe to 1 or 2 people. You want to give a real long description about a project update with links back to SharePoint. So, you know, all very well use email, but think less email, more Teams became a motto that we've got from another consultant, I think, in Australia. And you're also going to be getting alerts from your apps around notifications and task notifications and SharePoint notifications. So you still do need your email. And then we've got channel conversations and chat, where we were getting these annoyance statements coming up. And then there's one on here that's meeting chat notifications appear when I'm not actually in the meeting, but that has now been resolved by Microsoft. You can now go into your meeting options and you can manage your meeting chat, because the worry here that had been alerted was that people were in might have been invited to a meeting, then they didn't join the meeting, but you can still see the chat popping up. But that can now be managed by the meeting owner. So that's been a big plus point that Microsoft put out. So we gave them a good understanding as the part of the CIMITY training is, what actually is a team. It can have up to 100,000 members. Within the team, you have channels. Think about your channels as the children the children to the team, which is the parents. Each team can have up to 200 channels. When you are granted a team as a team owner, you get a general channel free. It cannot be deleted, and you can't edit the name of it. So we say perhaps use it for onboarding new members. Your conversations, the collaboration takes place in the channels, usually around a document. And you can save channel conversations. We show them all of this in the training, how to save channel conversations, and you've got potentially private channels, which Seb says that he said he really didn't like them, but he also gave examples of why you might use them. And then you've got chat, the Skype replacement, so you can have group chat, persistent chat, as I've already mentioned, can stay there for 30 days. You can pin your chats. I think you can pin up to 10 chats. But you can imagine working in an organisation, the scale of DWP, you're going to be having a lot of chats going on. The power of the dynamic search to find previous conversations is really powerful. And you've got, as I've already mentioned about meeting chat, you've got the options there. So one of the things I say about I guide people about the fact of channel conversations and chat, I like to give out this story, the like story. So imagine you are in a real room with 200 people and you tell those people something is helpful to them and they totally ignore you. But that's what it feels like if you make a post on anything that's out there on social media or anything. It's absolutely a horrible feeling if you get ignored. So my guide to you is please acknowledge posts. They're priceless and they cost nothing. The emoticons, you don't always have to respond, but it's just nice of the person that put a point out there to acknowledge that they've been heard. So just today I changed this headline on this slide here. This I just actually had on here, it just said the fun stuff, but a new success story popped up in DWP today, and the title of it was "Sweet Teams Are Made of This," which is that if you're as old as me, that's the Eurythmics record from the 1980s. So we fully encouraged the staff to have some fun on Teams with things called scavenger hunts and Teams bingo, create a work-life balance channel. They started calling them the playground. For you can go on walking meetings. You can someone said on that particular article that they've been doing they've got a virtual canteen, and some of them are doing virtual crosswords together once a week. You can have fun with polls and breakout rooms, and also whiteboard, hangman and Pictionary were going on as well. And also around Christmas and Halloween and probably coming up to Easter, this is the perfect place to have that work life, still working from home, going on now into a hybrid workplace. We're still going to be very much, continue to work from home. So there's a whole piece around file management, around the confusion around using SharePoint. So within DWP, they had a whole department dedicated to supporting them around SharePoint. There is a video that we did introduce to them in the training, and I can share that in the Q&A at the end that we use. But there is this model here that we use from around when you use the difference between OneDrive for personal file storage and then into SharePoint. And but coming to the end of this session, so we've got we ended it on, as you move outside your comfort zone, what was once the unknown and frightening becomes your new normal. And that's where the magic has been happening in Teams, in a public sector department of over 100,000 people. And as I said, some of them have worked there well over 20 years or more. They were passionate with their storytelling, and they just absolutely love using Teams now outside of Skype, email and file shares. So this was the training pathway, the learning pathway that we put them through to make that shift happen in just under 6 months for a massive group of people working from home. So we ran, as Stephen gave you the stats at the beginning, we ran oodles of leader-led sessions that we then all recording. They are now on demand and available in their DWP TV that sits in Stream. And just to finish off, so you could say what's next. There's still a lot to do, so I'm going to hand over to Stephen just to close the session off on what's happening next. So sorry if that was really quick, but there's an awful lot that we covered with these champions, and it appears to have landed really well. So hand over to Stephen.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll race through this because I know time's precious now. So basically, yeah, there'll almost be a stage 3 to what we're doing at DWP, which I'm sure Simply guys will come back and tell you all about it next session. But basically, now that we've seen millions and millions of chat messages going about, and we want to really embed that greater collaboration within the organisation, so there's going to be a big drive over the next 3 months about really focusing on what collaboration means and how to get the best out of that concept of being open, transparent, collectively sharing and working on documents within them channels, and really getting that concept in the department and fully fledged across key areas of the business. That'll be supported by an expanded pioneers community through more workshops like kind of Leslie's just gone through. Really make that the kind of the go-to community, and that drives the product teams to roll out different features when time permits. There's also a big migration underway, converting all our meeting rooms to kind of Teams rooms in terms of across all our multiple sites, and some really good use cases coming out of that. And then also the final phase will be, now that we've got users' appetite for change and they accept that this evergreen approach of features coming on a fortnightly basis almost, it's really about making sure that they're on top of and aware of this cascade of the roadmap, being aware of all the things that are coming out of Ignite, not overwhelming them, but really getting a culture of drip feeding them new features in to drive that momentum and keep that appetite for new things coming down. So that's going to be kind of phase 3, which no doubt we'll be back to talk about in due course, but I'll leave it at that point there because I know time's getting on.
Great, thanks Lesley, Lee and Steve. Great session, good work that you've done, and I think I'm sure you're enjoying every bit of it, and I'm sure there must have been challenges with people and everything else. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for being with us at M365 UK. We do have one question on the Q&A. I think you can probably see that because you're sharing the screen there. I'll read it out to you. So question from Andy Wilson, that solutions like M365 are designed to scale well technically, but you can only imagine that large-scale deployments in terms of, sorry, I just lost my screen there. Yeah, like DWP will come with exponentially greater challenges. What are the fundamental differences in terms of the approach you took when planning a 100,000 seat rollout compared to 1,000 seat deployment? Is there a magic formula, or if you get the planning right, can it be a case of rinse and repeat? Who wants to say that?
That sounds like a Lesley one, or Stephen. Yeah,
I'm happy to start with it now. Lesley can come in. It's basically, having done kind of a 1,000 seat deployment elsewhere in private sector as well, it's kind of seen both angles. First of all, from my personal experience, it's been the pace of it. In terms of 1,000 seat estate, you can get through it quite quickly, and there's not as many different scenarios that you have to tailor for. But in DWP, it's the sheer scale of it, in terms of there's different departments within the departments, and then subcategories of teams within that, and they all needed different coaching and different mechanisms to break that cultural change. Like as you mentioned, there was teams that we went into that had done things the same way for 20-30 years, so it was very hard breaking down them boundaries. Whereas a small organization, they're probably more used to things changing, or kind of a little bit more of a growth pattern within that organization because they're relatively small. So for me, it's been the the time it's took to get little things ticked off, but also taking into account the different scenarios with the fact that someone wants retention periods for this amount of time, others don't really care. It's the timing and the different scenarios that you have to take into account.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think, like you say, with small organizations, they tend to be very dynamic, so things change, chop and change rapidly. Whereas with large organizations, sometimes things do move slowly, but surely they get there. No, thanks for answering on that one, Steve. We got another question from Sarah, who says on 1st of March, they started implementation of Teams collaboration features such as Teams, channels, files, etc., and also Teams voice. They'll finish around middle of May. Training knowledge articles are all in place, and they've had a great take up on that. But the new digital champion network, they fear that it'll just open the door and really want to drive that adoption. So the key question there is, how do you keep this momentum going? Because obviously at DWP you've been doing this like for more than a year now, isn't it? I think this as a project.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a benefit that's come out of the fact that it hasn't been accustomed to change so much. The fact that new features are coming on board every so often, it's been about showcasing them. So whether it's been about like the new calling and meeting experience, that totally took it to a new level in terms of what people were used to from Skype for Business, and now we're layering it up by showcasing and drip feeding things in, like the live reactions, about making it fun as well. Really encouraging them to try things, take things on their own initiative, give things a go. We had a similar situation where momentum kind of dropped a little bit, where before the pioneers, we had a champions community that was almost like a notice board, and it kind of became a platform to kind of report problems and bypass technical support, all that sort of stuff. The pioneers was very much an exclusive club where we fed from the product team that this is coming soon, you're going to get early release to it, and creating that bit of an exclusive club, or really something in it for them where they've got that badge, to go away, showcase it, cascade down and come back when you told us you'd done so, meant that the champions had a bit of an incentive and a bit of pressure on them to kind of make sure things were rolled out. And it created that in-house competition where Joe Blogs was doing it, therefore Sarah thought she had to go and do it as well, and create that little bit of competition, bit of hunting around and scavenging to make sure that they're doing it the best. And that competition and that exclusive club nature really drove the momentum and continues to do so.
And it's the writing up the success stories as well. So Sarah, what if you haven't done so already? Go out there and find out what is actually making a difference. And that was the really key part of taking this to another level, that we really in the second workshop, the Go Beyond workshop, we gave each pioneer that came through in about a good 7 minutes out of we said we didn't want more than 7 people on a session that was going to be an hour, that we said this is your opportunity, we want to hear what you're actually doing, and where and that session was a sharing session for other pioneers to see, well, so and so's doing that, I didn't know we could do that. And I was learning things every time we were going in there. So capturing success stories and then getting them published, it's key. It really is key. Putting them up on your intranet, dangling that carrot to different parts of the organization. Yeah, get the success stories. It really is. It can really make a difference.
No, absolutely, that's the key, because I think one thing that doesn't really get recognized is the amount of time that goes inside, doesn't it, in terms of getting those things updated and kind of make it available for the pioneers or champions, and kind of see that through. So good, that's great. I think great questions there. I'm just looking through the Q&A. We don't have any more questions, but I'm sure the attendees they found the sessions today useful. And I just want to say one time, big thanks to you, Lesley, Stephen, and also Lee as well for being here today. and obviously kind of just seeing us through with the great sessions earlier on from Seb on governance, and combined with your story at DWP, and you know, looking forward to your ongoing journey that you have there with all the next steps that Stephen mentioned there. So wish you all the best and good luck to your journey with Teams there. And I've posted the feedback link in the Q&A, so please do fill that out. It's just 4 or 5 questions, very short form, so it really will help Lesley and the team to kind of, you know, understand the feedback and everything else. So if you can do that, that would be great. And so kind of just bringing that to a close really, and just to say that, look, you know, thanks for being here today. We have 14th of April next month around sessions on the Microsoft Teams. So we go in a bit of a development hat with the App Studio and everything else from Tommy in Austria. And then we've got Nut as well in terms of showing us everything about Microsoft Viva, which is constantly evolving, and you know, some of the modules are on pre-release and so forth. So you know, hopefully you can join us next month on that. And you know, by all means, follow us on M365 UK Twitter handle, and slides and this recording will be available by Friday. So with that, I just want to say thanks to everybody, and take care and stay well.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
good evening. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Lee.